Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining for this media briefing. I am Lisa Lord. We know many Barbadians have questions surrounding the ash fall from the La Soufriere volcano over in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, which has made its way here to Barbados, as well as what is happening at the Grantley Adams International Airport. And we are hoping that this briefing will answer as many of those questions as possible. We will be addressed by the Minister of Tourism and International Transport, Senator the Honorable Lisa Cummins, Director of the Barbados Met Service, Mr. Zabu Best, the Director of the Civil Aviation Department, Mrs. Tracy Ford Bailey, and the Chief Executive Officer of the Grantley Adams International Airport, Inc., Mr. Hadley Bourne. We will begin with Minister Cummins.
Just yesterday, we heard from the Minister with responsibility for Home Affairs, the Honorable Wilfred Abrams, and he spoke about, along with his team, what was expected to happen across the island as a result of the Mount Soufriere explosion in Barbados, eruption in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We woke up this morning and we have seen gloomy skies, ash fall, the vehicles are covered in ash, and that has implications for our airspace. As at 5:30 yesterday evening, our airspace was declared closed on advice from the Barbados Civil Aviation Department, and here this evening with us, we have our Director for Civil Aviation along with the CEO of the Grantley Adams International Airport, and they will share with you what has been happening. But I want to give Barbadians the assurance that we have taken every possible precaution to ensure that the Grantley Adams International Airport and all of our airdrome installations are secure, that we have protected the equipment that is based at the Grantley Adams International Airport, and that we have taken every measure to ensure that there are no flight challenges coming into Barbados, and that is the basis on which we have closed the airspace. There has been very little to low visibility in our lower airspace, and the Director of Civil Aviation is going to share a little bit about what that means for air travel. And we have received many calls from Barbadians who are meant to be traveling out or meant to have their relatives traveling in, and we know that there has been some disruption as a result of the cancellation of flights. All flights were cancelled yesterday, and all flights remain cancelled throughout the weekend, and you will hear more from the Grantley Adams International Airport on that. But first, I'd like to invite the Director of Meteorological Services, Mr. Sabu Best, to give us an update on what the ash from St. Vincent and the Grenadines has meant for our... Yes.
I thought you were still going. Good afternoon. Thank you,
Mr. Best, you're
Minister.
muted at the moment. Could you turn on your
Uh,
mic?
Actually, I'm unmuted. I'm not sure why you're not hearing me, but I'm actually unmuted.
Okay, we can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, so thank you, Minister, and good afternoon, everyone. So just to repeat what actually transpired last night and into this morning, La Soufriere volcano in St. Vincent continued its eruption, uh, which it started, a couple of days ago or so. But last night was a little different in terms of what was being expelled. There's a lot of volcanic ash that actually was expelled during the night, but the direction or trajectory changed slightly. Where in yesterday morning it was more focused to the north of Barbados in terms of the trajectory, but since the wind pattern has changed slightly, it has allowed some of this volcanic ash from the mid to upper levels to make its way direct from St. Vincent to Barbados. From our last checks and estimates, it takes about an hour and a half once the ash itself and plume gets into the atmosphere from the volcano. It takes about an hour and a half to make this journey from St. Vincent to the island. This is primarily because of the speedy upper level winds, and that could vary once if the speedy upper level winds change as well. But in checking the forecast for the winds for the next few days, it's not going to be much significant change whatsoever in terms of direction or speed. So once the volcano keeps erupting the way it has been the past 12 hours or so, we will be in the mix of things. There were a lot of questions I know about how long is this going to keep going. we can only speak from a meteorological perspective, and like I indicated, the wind pattern is there for it. So once it keeps going, it's going to just keep coming. Um, so, but from a forecast perspective, what we are able to do is give you very accurate timelines. As once it's expelled from the volcano up into the atmosphere, we can basically tell you how soon a wind is going to get here, how long outbreak is going to last. Like this morning, there were in and out really dark plumes that came through. We nailed those down to almost a minute as they came through. And then in between those dark plumes, you get some bit of clearing, relatively, say clearing, and it's I really have to put that inverted commas because it's not really clearing per se, but it's not as dark and gloomy sometimes. And those dark, gloomy ones really make the street lights come on, and inside your homes are really dark. But like I said, so outside of the hour and a half, basically you rely on the research center, what's coming up from them in terms of the activity of the volcano. They say it's continuing to be very active and they get a lot of tremors. So more than likely, it's going to continue for the whole day and into most parts of tonight. Going outside of that, it becomes a little choppy. Choppy with respect to uncertainty, I should say, if it will continue to erupt like this. That's kind of out of my area of expertise, but for sure we can say today and into tonight, we don't expect it to just cool off and stop just like that. Not from the tremors that have been reported still going on. So there's still a lot going on in the volcano, and there's still a lot more to come for today and tonight.
I'll go to Director of Civil Aviation, Mrs. Tracy Ford Bailey.
Thank you and good afternoon. As you know, the major eruption in St. Vincent has forced the closure of our national airspace system and the cancellation of flights in and out of Barbados. The decision was taken by the Civil Aviation Department based on the report received from the local Met Office. According to the Met Office, plumes were traverse across our national airspace, and in further consultation with the Airport Authority, the Grantley Adams International Airport, as well as our regional counterparts, a decision was taken to close the national airspace around 5:30 p.m. last evening. NOTAMs were also sent and issued by the Civil Aviation Department as required, and for the benefit of foremost. A NOTAM is a notice that is filed with the Civil Aviation Authority, and it provides alerts to pilots on flight hazard along the route as well as a particular location. This information was issued by the Trinidad and Tobago Civil Aviation Authority again today. The time has been extended now onto Monday. On Sunday, the airport is expected to reopen if condition changes. Unfortunately, at this time, due to the volcanic activity, it is quite uncertain. With respect to the international flights, the coordination continues with the Area Control Center, which is located in Trinidad and Tobago. The Trinidad and Tobago Civil Aviation Authority will continue to pass advisory to all international flights. At this time, the Civil Aviation Authority will transfer the responsibility to the airline pilot to determine whether or not flights can or will continue to destination of its choice. For instance, only yesterday, after the major eruption in St. Vincent around 3 p.m. yesterday afternoon, British Airways en route to Barbados make a very conscious decision to divert its aircraft to Antigua. Given the heightened volcanic activity and based on the reports provided by the local Met Department, updates will be provided as required by the Barbados Civil Aviation Department. When the airspace is reopened, NOTAMs will be issued to the relevant agencies, and Air Traffic Services will continue with its coordination and pass advisory to all aircraft entering into our airspace. Again, the determination will be made by the airline pilot based on what is observed in the airspace. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Ford Bailey. We move now to the Chief Executive Officer of the Grantley Adams International Airport, Inc., Mr. Hadley Bourne.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Barbados. Continuing on from what Ms. Ford Bailey said, we would have taken a conscious decision. We were always in constant communication with the Civil Aviation Department and the Director of the Meteorological Services. And our preparation for such activity actually commenced on Thursday evening when we held a joint meeting in collaboration with the Civil Aviation personnel in Trinidad. And we had actually commenced that planning activity. Hence then, one thing, I mean, most persons in aviation would know that ash is significantly detrimental to aircraft and air travel. And from a airport point of view, we provide basically all of the navigational aids and telecommunication support for the Civil Aviation Department. So we said we'd take a conscious decision to protect our equipment, so we would have removed all of our navigational aids and such like offline. So that would have affected being able to traverse the airspace from not only from a safety point of view as it pertains to the ash, but also from a navigational point of view. We are in constant contact with Mr. Best, so we said we would have keep a 6-hour update in terms of how the conditions are based on volcanic activity. We would have initially disseminated a NOTAM for this morning, but it was subsequently extended. And as to when the Grantley Adams International Airport would be able to reopen would be significantly dependent on the activity in our neighboring sister island.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bourne. We move now to questions, and joining us from the media are Anesta Henry from Barbados Today, Colvin Mounsey from the Nation newspaper, Ryan Broom from CBC, Regina Salmon Moore, the Barbados Advocate. Go ahead with your questions. Go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon, Minister and guests. If I may delve right into impact on the tourism, with uncertainty looming at this moment regarding volcanic activity in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, in addition to the possibility of our airspace visibility being impaired on a regular basis, what type of what should I put it? How should I put it? What type of impact are we expecting in terms of our ambition for reopening the tourism sector? For example, marketing and flight availability. What type of impact does that now pose for us?
Thanks for the question, Colvin. It's a good question, but I think I'm going to start with a little bit of background. If you recall, we talked about how few persons have actually been traveling into the country since the start of the year. And I believe just yesterday I was sharing in a different presentation that since January through March, we saw just about 6,000 odd persons coming into the country, which is not normal for Barbados at this time of the year. So we're already seeing significantly low numbers. Just today, for example, we were looking at somewhere in the vicinity of 82 passengers in principle expected on island, and just over 50-something odd expected to fly out. So we're already in a period where the numbers are quite low to begin with. So I believe just when Prime Minister spoke a few days ago, you would have heard her talk about the country looking to reopen and using the month of April and then being prepared by May 8th for a reopening. So this period of time right here now is not necessarily anticipated for us to see an immediate spike in numbers, because at the same time as we are dealing with these difficulties, the UK remains closed to international travel and to leisure travel. Canada remains closed through the end of April, and so we largely would be seeing travelers that are coming from the US, but also in quite low numbers. So when we talk about the outlook for tourism and arrivals, in particular using air traffic, the numbers are already low because of the combination of what's happening in our overseas source markets and what's happening here in Barbados as we prepare for a reopening in May. But at the same time, Colvin, what I would say is that 3 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, or certainly at the end of last year, we were dealing with COVID alone, and we were dealing with lockdowns and curfews and whether there were enough flights coming in or international arrivals. Now we're dealing with an entirely different scenario, a combination of COVID-19 and all of the things that we've now become accustomed to, and volcanic ash affecting our airspace. And so I think if one thing we're clear about is that we don't have any promises or guarantees about what tomorrow will hold. But what we have to do is what Prime Minister has been speaking about all of the time. Plan and mitigate for all of the risks that we're being presented with and adjust as quickly as challenges are presented before us. So let's hope that come May 8th, we are in a position to see a clearing of the skies and that we're able to see our source markets in a position where their infection rates are under control, their vaccination programs are continuing to be rolled out aggressively. We here in Barbados continue to have our vaccination programs rolled out aggressively, and that at the same time we're able to see some resumption of the tourism industry. Certainly by summer we're expecting a modest resumption, but the forward bookings for the fourth quarter are already quite strong. So we're going to be pushing forward to see how aggressively we can settle the protocols, for example, which have already been approved. We can work with our source partners to make sure that we can resume travel safely. We're hoping, in particular with our cruise ship partners, to be able to see a summer season. But all those things are dependent on circumstances which, quite frankly, are largely out of our concern, like volcanoes. But we are going to be making sure that every effort is made to have a safe resumption of tourism as soon as it is feasible to do so.
Good afternoon. Can anyone say how many flights have been affected by the closure of the Grantley Adams Airport?
The CEO of the airport to share a little bit about that.
Hi, good afternoon. Significant number of our flights have been impacted. If I feel probably 7 to 8 a day, both inbound and outbound from all the major carriers, Virgin, British Airways, American, JetBlue, and the regional carriers into Caribbean, Liat, Caribbean Airlines. So they've all been hampered.
Question for Minister Cummins.
If I could add, just to put it in context though, they have been affected, yes, in terms of flying in and out of Barbados, but their load capacities in so doing are still quite low. So we don't have the numbers of persons filling the seats on the planes, but we do have the planes flying because we would have done quite a bit of consolidation of flights since earlier up in the year.
Ryan, I believe you were next with a question.
Yeah, a question for Minister Cummins. I know yesterday we were at one stage of this, today we're at a different stage in terms of the question of accommodation. Have any official requests been made yet by St. Vincent for accommodation here on island for any of the evacuees? Are we not there yet?
I am not aware of any accommodation requests that have come in from anywhere at this point. Those will come through the Office of the Prime Minister, and as soon as that has been completed, we will be advised.
And a question now for Mr. Best. Before we had this volcanic ash situation, we had a Sahara dust situation, which was pretty severe. Has that passed us already, or are we still experiencing that along with the ash situation?
Thanks for your question, Ryan. We did had a significant dust sales outbreak a few days ago during this week, probably mid-session in the middle of this week. But coming up to late yesterday evening, that was pretty much clearing out. So it moved from moderate to thick to like slight to moderate by yesterday evening. And so the computer models are actually predicting that next few days it's just going to be basically just slight haze or so. It's no way compared to the impacts from the volcanic ash. The volcanic ash is going to take complete precedence over in terms of the reduction to visibility and the impacts that the volcanic ash will be doing. It's actually more harmful than the dust haze. Because one of the reasons because the particle size is actually a little larger than the actually Sahara dust, to be honest. The thing is, the dust haze is actually a little easier to predict because that's a meteorological, well, not, it's part of meteorology, even though it's a leaf for a meter. But the thing is, we can forecast that days out. can't forecast this volcanic ash days out. But for the primary concern again is just the volcanic ash. There's no real significant contribution from the dossiers that's involved in there because the volcanic ash is so thick itself. So I can tell you we've been reporting visibility here times 5 kilometers, and I believe honestly that in some sections like in St. Lucie and the middle of the island it probably goes down to maybe 3 kilometers horizontally. That's really low, and we haven't had a dossiers outbreak that thick here, as far as I can remember, in years. There was I remember there was a year that dossiers did get that thick. It was really very thick, but it's not a very common occurrence. But over the next few days, dossiers should not be a problem. Our concern really is the volcanic ash. From a meteorological perspective, there's nothing else currently out there to worry about. I mean, we're not in the hurricane season yet, so that's a plus. And the swells, in terms of the magnitude of the swells, should be fine. No excessive rainfall expected. And there's a negative impact right now that all this volcanic ash is going to have in any kind of precipitation that may want to come through right now because of the abundance of the ash itself in the atmosphere. So it's going to remain dry, particularly if it remains thick like this. I want to touch something just outside of that from a marine perspective, particularly on the west coast. We're actually advising, warning marine goers, fishermen, stay in port. Do not venture out. The visibility is actually worse when you go westward away from the island towards St. Vincent. It is worse, and these plumes coming really quick from the west, and they can drop the visibility even more. So for those who actually use the landmarks as a guide to get home, that could become a problem during these outbreaks as they come through.
Minister, if I may return to the first question I would have asked. Yes, are you still hearing me?
Go ahead, Colville. We can hear you.
Colville. Please
Yes.
go ahead.
Yes, if I may return to the first question I would have asked. The little I know from a layman's perspective of tourism marketing and so on, uncertainty doesn't quite go well with that at all, especially for airlines and for potential persons coming in. What plans are in place to try to give, I know you can't give assurances at this point, but what plans are in place to try to combat that to some extent, given the fact that this could drag on for months?
I think we are perhaps in the admirable position of not being the only country in the world that is in the position of uncertainty. I think all of our source markets, every single economy in the world, every single tourism-dependent economy in the world is facing the identical uncertainty that you're making reference to. So I don't know, when I speak to my colleagues and I speak to them regularly, I hear them having the same types of challenges on any given day that we are having. And the questions related to uncertainty, when, if, how, and from where tourism will return is something that is not a uniquely Barbadian challenge. What I can tell you is that in order to begin planning for a resumption of travel, we have looked at a various number of models. We have pessimistic forecasting for when we could begin, and there are pessimistic forecasts that say to us that perhaps the outlook for the resumption of tourism could be as far out as 2025. And then there are optimistic scenarios that say to us that by 2023 we could actually see a resumption. There are some countries that are saying to us, well, they're going with the 2025 projections because there's so much uncertainty, to use your word, that they really are not in a position to plan. So what does that mean for marketing? It means that all of the marketing agencies are simply, as you can see, and if you follow all of the pages that are for each of the countries' major destinations, they're all talking about when we return, we're looking forward to welcoming you back. When you're free to travel again, we're here waiting for you. And so the marketing really is about keeping the destination at this point top of mind, so that when people are able to travel again, people have choices and that they're able to make a decision about where they want to go first, how long they want to spend and what kind of product and service they're looking for. And it is our responsibility to ensure that we are able to market Barbados and keep it top of mind, front and center in the markets that we are typically engaged in. Keep it top of mind, front and center in the markets that we are not traditionally known for, and that we're able to maintain that competitive edge for marketing. But I think we're also very clear that there is no economy in the world, no tourism economy in the world that is not facing uncertainty in the same way that Barbados is. We just have to make sure that we keep the markets aware of where we are and what we're doing. So for example, we're talking here about the volcanic ash. We've already communicated what's happening to the markets. But when we communicate to the markets, for example, the UK is waiting to hear what is going to be announced for their market on the 17th of May because they don't know. They're facing the uncertainty of what the announcements will look like. The Canadian market, for example, is waiting to see what will happen on April 30th because they don't know. They're also dealing with that level of uncertainty. Europe, for example, has also gone into various forms of the third wave, the fourth wave in some instances. That has an impact on our UK travel because most of those travelers come through the UK and they're facing a different level of uncertainty. And so I wouldn't want us to think for a moment that uncertainty is a uniquely Barbadian phenomenon. It is very much one of those moments where it's global and it's been globalized by COVID first, and now here in Barbados and in the Eastern Caribbean by Mount Soufriere, in Europe. It's as a result of lockdowns and surges and vaccination rates and trials and so on. And in different countries, uncertainty is being driven by several different things. We just have to make sure that we continue doing the best that we can to be the best that we can be, circumstances notwithstanding.
I just have a question.
So,
Go ahead,
Minister
Regina.
Cummings? Yes, please. Tourism ministers just this week were talking about the possibility of looking at intra-regional travel as well as domestic tourism going forward, given what is happening. Are you making any plans in these areas?
Absolutely. We were talking about it just this week, as you have said, and this was the CTO panel that was held on Wednesday and other fora where we were absolutely talking about domestic travel. We have been talking about domestic travel here in Barbados, domestic tourism, what we call it community tourism, but we've actually taken it a little bit further. We're talking about community tourism and community-owned and community-led tourism, where people feel as though they have a stake in the tourism product. And then intra-regional travel, there are any number of carriers that have emerged in the last year or so. And coming up this week, we actually have a planned meeting with all of the regional carriers for the purpose of looking at intra-regional travel. That obviously is significantly impacted as a result of these airspace closures and what that means as a result of all for all of the travel within the region. But that doesn't mean that we can't plan. So we are absolutely going to be doing that. One of the other things that we are also going to be doing during the course of this week is meeting on cruise and how we can, as regional economies, coordinate on the itineraries that are on the cruise lines so that we have identical protocols or at least uniformity in the protocols and that there is a gold standard. We're also going to be looking this week among the regional tourism ministers. We've started conversations, many of us already, about raising awareness about tourism-dependent economies and the impact of COVID, but we were preparing for a discussion on the impact of COVID on tourism-dependent economies and what that means as we head into the hurricane season. We didn't have at the time a volcano erupting and volcanic ash on our radar, but it most definitely has now come to the top of the agenda, even as we have not yet faced the hurricane season. So, you know, I mean, if you can segue back into Colville's question, uncertainty is perhaps, unfortunately, one of the things that is with us to stay as we navigate this season that we're working through. But yes, planning must continue. Pardon? Say again.
Go ahead, Regina.
Say again.
I also had a question for Mr. Bourne as it relates to the aviation equipment, etc. We're just wondering if, in terms of the cleanup process, or if will be any damage to the equipment, any concerns about that, Mr. Bourne?
Well, at this point in time, I'm keeping in close contact with my engineering and electronics team. They're monitoring the equipment. We wouldn't be able to give a definite decision until that fully goes online. But within a 3 to 4 hour period, once they're powered back up, we'll be able to ascertain. But when we took the decision to take them offline, they were in full working order, and that was the main reason we did that. And I'm sure that we will be good once we return to operations.
Colville, I believe you had a question.
Yes, final question from me. If I just switch gears. Last year, when we had that slight issue with testing, we had made certain promises of reimbursements and return flights, etc. Could you give me an update, Minister, as to how many persons would have taken advantage of this offer, what is the total cost in the end?
Colville, thanks for the question. We had quite a number of persons who, between January and February, I should say, who applied for that program. We have had quite a number of persons who were affected, and the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. has been given the responsibility of working with those persons along with our hotel partners, and at a later date we will be in a position to give you some additional details on that question. Today may not be the best time for us to deal with that, but we'll be in a position to share that with you on another occasion.
Final question from me for Mr. Best. I know we were initially affected by that first set of volcanic ash in the north of the island, but this second set of explosions that we've had, is it more uniform? Is it more even now over the island, or is it still concentrated in a particular part? Or can more people around the island start to see the same levels?
Well, first I gotta mention it's not a second. It's not a second set. We've had a lot. Too many beyond count. So it's not a second. So it's not uniformly spread across the island, and even as the plumes come across the island, it doesn't come all one time. The northern, like I said, the northern central parts are the heavier impacted parts of the island. With respect to the accumulation of the ash, even with respect to the darkness and how outside looks. Mind you, I've been monitoring the mesoscale sector, and in about, I say, 10 minutes or so, another dark plume should be coming over from the north. And so guys, our folks, our good friends up north should be seeing the skies turn real dark again. And as the day goes on, we get closer to night, so many dark plumes come in again. Night is going to look like it comes a lot sooner, to be honest. So it's going to get dark outside pretty quickly. I should also add, though, because I didn't mention before that body impacts. Persons actually will be smelling outside. It smells a little bit burny. That's from the ash itself, and there's also the smell of SO2, sulfur dioxide. So it's going to smell. It's going to smell strange, and that smell. Those smells will probably going to track itself into your homes, regardless of part of your home. I was in a very tight, confined section of my home, and I still smelt it. In terms of deposit of ash, all open services will have it. Even if you have items covered in the open, they say in a garage or whatever, it's still going to make its way, not to the same degree in open air, but there will still be deposits. But sticking out to your question, it's not going to be uniform across the island. The eruptions is not uniform in itself. Every eruption is not going to be the same. Each of them is unique, like an individual, to be honest. And so what's expelled is different each and every time, in terms of size, in terms of intensity. And then we got the other part is the meteorological component of the winds, which more or less kind of remaining kind of constant. So that's the easy. I'll be honest with you, that's kind of the easiest part right now. The most difficult part is trying to determine when is it going to stop.
Are there more questions?
Okay, Mr.
Anesta.
Okay, Mr. Best. So speaking about when it's going to stop, we know that earlier today, the chief medical officer, Dr. George, basically advised people to stay indoors unless it's necessary for them to go out. We know a number of people have already gone to work and have to make their way home. What will be your advice to these individuals? And if this continues into tomorrow, do you think we should look at the possibility of more people staying home in terms of the workforce?
Okay, so I'd say advice. I guess you're referring to. Are you referring to medical advice? Are you referring to logistics advice? Because those would be kind of out of my jurisdiction, to be honest. I'm going to just give from a advice on a perspective from what to expect. So I would leave questions or defer questions, such questions like that, to the chief medical officer and also to the transport board, etc.
I just have a follow-up for Mr. Best. I
Sure.
know you said to leave it to the health officials, but persons are wondering whether they should be cleaning up the ash. What's the process? I don't know if you can give us some idea about how we should be interacting in terms of our dress, in terms of going out, as Anesta said. What do we do from here?
Well, no, I want to add to that, but I'll try to still put in my 5 cents here. Uh, if the ash is still falling and it's been continuously falling from the night right through the whole day, even if you don't see it, it has been falling. So going clean outside is probably an effort that's going to be wasted, to be honest, because it's going to come right back down. But inside your homes, you should really, as much as possible, keep your surfaces clean because imagine if you have your windows closed or partially closed because you don't want so much ash to make its way in, it's going to get pretty warm and you may want to work your fan or whatever. And in doing so, you may actually kick up the ash in your house and make it very uncomfortable and start burning eyes. Maybe you get runny nose, itching. Uh, who knows? That may affect more adversely affect persons with respiratory issues or may just flare up allergy with someone. But if you're going to do things like that, do what makes you very comfortable. If you find that working the fan and the dust and the ashes in there is not really much of a problem, you work what's comfortable with you. How frequent you have to clean it, really and truly, that has to be a decision made on a personal level within your home, because it also depends on how much of the ash makes its way into your home. So it can really prescribe how frequent you can do it, but you monitor your surfaces. If it's tabletops, it's easy to clean off, but for those who have carpet surfaces, you always have to vacuum that. You may not very well see the ash in there, but trust me, when you turn the fans on, it's going to kick it up, and it's probably going to flare up any kind of allergic reactions for some persons. So just be mindful of those things. But in terms of clothing and stuff, I'm sorry, I can tell you perhaps if the rain is falling, they can give you good advice on what kind of clothing you can wear to protect you against the rain and stuff. But against the ash, I lack that expertise. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Best, Mr. Best, I think what I'm trying to ask you is, as a professional in your field, would you advise authorities if we see the asphalt continuing along the road that it's continuing? Would you advise authorities, to limit the workforce tomorrow in terms of the amount of people going out to work?
I think from my professional perspective, well, first thing, volcanic ash is not in our professional perspective. I'm a meteorologist, and so we don't necessarily deal with volcanic ash. We can help predict its trajectory and perhaps how significant it will be. And that's what we would do with the officials. And I don't want to be honest with you. I don't want to be premature and make such a decision because when I sit and meet with other stakeholders within the government service, they actually make some really good recommendations and they have a better insight and knowledge into a lot more things. So it's not from a one person perspective or one person experience or one person professional area, but it's collectively. And it will be premature for me to actually make a suggestion like that without even a good consultation. Yes, given them my experience, not my experience, my expertise from a meteorological perspective, but the other persons within the field, such as CIMH, which have professionals within the area that can give another area of accountability and expertise in this.
Sorry, Anesta, did you have a follow-up?
Just to be fair, though, I think we
No, thanks.
Colleagues, just to be fair, though, I think we have to ensure that we are asking the professionals in the respective fields questions that are within their remit. And I think we put Mr. Best in a bit of a tight spot there by asking him questions that are not really best directed to the meteorological office. So, no pun intended. But I'm sure that at the appropriate time, the officials that have responsibility for those matters and for those decisions will communicate. I think we've been very clear. We started yesterday with Minister Abrams speaking about the livestock and having the agricultural officials there. And then we spoke about we had the medical officials there as well, the CMO. Today we have the civil aviation team and Mr. Best. And so we give the commitment that at any given time that there is an issue that has to be ventilated for the benefit of the public, or there are questions that we are seeing being asked repeatedly, as was the case with today, many people who had flights to take, that the appropriate officials will come and they will share that information with Barbadians. We give you that commitment.
And
So-
check in with the media again to ensure that there are no more questions. Colville?
Actually, I know I said the last question, but I guess there's always a last. Minister, could you give me an update on the welcome stamp, please? What's the status of that at this moment?
Colville, if we can put that in context again, we did say earlier that there are not a lot of flights coming into Barbados with a number of significant persons traveling in. We did speak earlier about the fact that from January to March, there were just 6,000 persons coming into the island, and that we all were dealing with periods of lockdown and the curfews. And so as a result of that, there has not been a significant movement as it relates to persons traveling for leisure during that period. However, we're very confident that during the course of the year, as the country continues to move towards the reopening that you made reference to earlier in May, that we will see more persons again coming to the country. So we'll have that conversation then when persons have come back into Ireland and they're here, and we're starting to see, following from May 8th, what our airlift looks like. We're already making plans for what that could look like. We already have heard from Prime Minister about the protocols and what those vaccinated protocols. We are already making the recommendation that we reopen for vaccinated persons, and so we're expecting that our welcome stamp profile will change. It will change from those persons who may have been traveling in the initial stages to get away from lockdowns and curfews and surging infection rates, and there are going to be those persons who will come to enjoy our island for a year or for 6 months in some instances, as we have been seeing, after they have been vaccinated. So this is an evolving circumstance. Changes are underway, and the expectation, especially coming out of the US market with the pace of vaccinations ongoing there, that when we do see a reopening in May, that we will again see a resurgence in persons of the coming to Barbados under the welcome stamp.
Thank you very much, Minister Cummins. That was Minister of Tourism and International Transport, Senator the Honorable Lisa Cummins. We were also addressed by the Director of the Barbados Met Services, Mr. Samuel Best, the Director of Civil Aviation, Mrs. Tracy Ford Bailey, and the Chief Executive Officer of the Grantley Adams International Airport, Inc., Mr. Hadley Bourne. Members of the media, thank you as well, and you at home for watching.